The concert hall was empty now. The last of the audience had left an hour ago, their expensive shoes clicking against the marble floors as they made their way to waiting cars and late dinners. The chandeliers still glowed overhead, casting warm light across rows of red velvet seats. On the stage, a grand piano sat in silence, its polished black surface reflecting the lights like a dark mirror. And in the back corner, near the emergency exit, a woman in a faded blue uniform pushed a mop across the floor. Her name was Irina. She was 36 years old, though the tiredness in her eyes made her look older. Her hands were rough from years of cleaning chemicals and hard work. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, a few gray strands showing at her temples. She moved slowly, methodically, the way someone moves when they have done the same job for so many years that their body no longer needs their mind to guide it. This was her life now. 5 nights a week, she cleaned the Vienna Grand Concert Hall. She arrived at 10 in the evening, after the performances ended, and she left at 6 in the morning, before the day staff arrived. In between, she mopped floors, polished handrails, scrubbed toilets, and emptied trash cans. She worked alone most nights, which she preferred. It was easier that way. No small talk. No awkward conversations. No one asking questions she did not want to answer. The concert hall was beautiful. She had noticed that on her first night, 12 years ago, when she had walked through the grand entrance with her cleaning cart, and felt like she had stepped into another world. The ceiling was painted with angels and clouds. The walls were covered in gold leaf. The seats were soft and perfectly arranged in curved rows that swept toward the stage like waves. And the piano was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, Dot. It was a Steinway. She knew that without anyone telling her. She knew it from the shape of the legs, the curve of the lid, the way the keys seemed to glow in the stage lights. She had played a Steinway once, a long time ago, in another life. The memory came to her sometimes when she was alone in the hall, when the silence was so complete that she could almost hear music that was no longer playing. But that was a long time ago. That was before. Irina had grown up in a small town in Romania, in a house with a leaky roof and a garden full of vegetables. Her father worked in a factory. Her mother cleaned houses for wealthy families in the city. They did not have much money, but they had enough. And they had something else, something that changed everything. They had a piano, Dot. It was an old upright, scratched and worn, with a few keys that stuck when you pressed them. Irina's grandmother had bought it decades earlier, back when she was young and dreamed of being a concert pianist. Life had other plans for her grandmother, but the piano remained in the family, passed down like a secret treasure. Irina was 4 years old when she first touched the keys. She remembered the moment clearly, even now. She had been playing on the floor near her grandmother's feet when she heard something that made her stop. Her grandmother was humming a melody, soft and sad, and Irina felt something stir inside her chest. She stood up, walked to the piano, and pressed a key. The note rang out, clear and bright, and Irina felt like the whole world had shifted. Her grandmother watched her with wide eyes. Then she smiled. From that day on, Irina played every chance she got. Her grandmother taught her the basics, then found a teacher in the city who agreed to give her lessons for a reduced fee. Irina practiced for hours every day, before school and after, until her fingers ached, and her mother had to call her for dinner 3 times before she would stop. Dot. By the time she was 8, people in her town were talking about her. By 10, she was performing in local competitions and winning. By 12, she had been accepted into the Bucharest Conservatory, one of the most prestigious music schools in Eastern Europe. Her parents scraped together every penny they had to pay for her tuition, her uniform, her train tickets to the city. They believed in her. Everyone believed in her, and Irina believed in herself. She practiced 8 hours a day. She studied with the best teachers. She learned Chopin and Liszt and Rachmaninoff, pieces so difficult that her classmates would shake their heads in disbelief when she played them. Her teachers said she had a gift. They said she would perform on the greatest stages in the world. They said her name would be remembered. She was 15 when everything fell apart. It started with her father losing his job. The factory closed, and suddenly there was no money coming in. Her mother took on more cleaning jobs, working from dawn until midnight, but it was not enough. The bills piled up. The food ran out. Irina's younger brother got sick, and the medicine he needed cost more than her family earned in a month. Irina tried to keep going. She took a bus to Bucharest every weekend, practicing in the conservatory's rooms until her fingers bled. But she could see the strain on her parents' faces. She could hear them arguing at night about money, about bills, about what to sell next. One evening, she came home to find her grandmother's piano gone. Her mother had sold it to pay for her brother's medicine. Irina did not cry. She did not say anything. She just walked to her room and sat on her bed and stared at the wall. A month later, she dropped out of the conservatory. Her parents begged her not to, but she had made up her mind. She was the oldest child. It was her responsibility to help. She got a job at a textile factory, working 12-hour shifts. Her fingers that once danced across piano keys, now feeding fabric into machines. She was 16 years old, and her dreams were over. The years passed. Irina worked. She helped her family survive. Her brother got better. Her father found odd jobs here and there. Her mother kept cleaning houses. And Irina stopped playing piano altogether. She could not bear to touch the keys, not when every note reminded her of what she had lost. When she was 24, she made a decision. There was nothing left for her in Romania. The economy was struggling. Jobs were scarce. A friend told her about opportunities in Austria, about cleaning jobs that paid more in a month than she could earn in 3 months back home. So Irina packed a small bag, said goodbye to her family, and took a bus to Vienna. She had been there ever since. 12 years of cleaning. 12 years of early mornings and late nights. 12 years of watching wealthy people walk past her like she was invisible, their eyes sliding over her as if she were part of the furniture. She had learned to accept it. She had learned to keep her head down and do her work, and not think too much about what might have been. But sometimes, late at night, when the concert hall was empty and the piano sat silent on the stage, Irina would stop her mopping and just look at it. She would remember what it felt like to play. She would remember the way the music used to flow through her, like water, like light, like something alive. And she would feel an ache so deep in her chest that she had to turn away and focus on her work just to keep breathing. Tonight was one of those nights. She finished mopping the main floor and pushed her cart toward the stage. The piano gleamed under the lights, beautiful and untouchable. Irina paused at the edge of the stage, her hand resting on her mop handle. Her fingers twitched, a tiny movement she could not control. She had not played in 20 years. She probably could not even remember how, but standing there, alone in that empty hall, she felt something stir inside her. Something she had buried a long time ago. Something that refused to stay dead. She pushed the feeling down, like she always did, and went back to work. She did not know that her life was about to change forever. It happened on a Thursday night in late November. The concert that evening had been a special one. A famous pianist from Berlin had performed, and the hall had been packed with people in elegant clothes and expensive jewelry. Irina had watched from the back during her break, standing in the shadows near the exit doors where no one could see her. The pianist was young, maybe 25, with confident hands and a sharp suit. He played Beethoven, then Debussy, then finished with a dramatic piece by Liszt that made the audience leap to their feet. Irina had stood there, frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that piece. She had played it once, a lifetime ago, in a competition in Bucharest. She had won first place that day. Her teacher had cried. Her parents had held her so tight she could barely breathe. Now she was a cleaner, watching from the shadows, invisible. After the performance ended, Irina went back to work. She started in the lobby, picking up programs that people had dropped on the floor, wiping down the brass handrails, emptying the trash bins near the coat check. The work was mindless, which she usually appreciated. But tonight her thoughts kept drifting back to the piano, to the music, to the young man on stage who had everything she had once dreamed of having. By midnight, the building was mostly empty. The security guards had done their rounds and retreated to the small office near the back entrance, where they watched television and drank coffee until morning. The lights in the main hall had been dimmed, but not turned off completely. Irina pushed her cart through the heavy wooden doors and began her usual routine. That was when she heard the laughter. It came from the stage. Irina looked up, surprised. The hall was supposed to be empty by now. But there, sitting on the piano bench and standing around the stage, was a group of young people. 5 of them, maybe 6. They were dressed casually, not in the formal clothes of the evening's audience. Students, Irina guessed. Music students from the university. They sometimes stayed late after performances, talking to the musicians or exploring the building. She recognized one of them. A tall young man with wavy brown hair and an arrogant smile. She had seen him before, several times, always surrounded by friends who laughed at everything he said. He was clearly the leader of the group, the one everyone looked to for approval. Right now, he was sitting at the piano, playing a simple melody with exaggerated movements, making his friends laugh. Irina lowered her head and continued mopping. She moved slowly along the back of the hall, hoping they would not notice her. She just wanted to do her job and go home. She did not want any trouble, but the young man had sharp eyes. "Hey," he called out, his voice echoing through the empty hall. "Hey, you, cleaning lady." Irina pretended not to hear. She kept her eyes on the floor and pushed her mop in steady strokes. "I'm talking to you," he said, louder now. His friends had gone quiet, watching. "Come here." Irina stopped. She could feel her heart beating faster. She knew she should just ignore him and walk away. But something in his tone made her pause. It was the way people had spoken to her for years. Like she was nothing. Like she did not matter. She looked up. The young man grinned. He was handsome. She could see that, with bright eyes and perfect teeth. But there was something cruel in his smile, something that reminded her of boys she had known in school, who liked to pull wings off butterflies just to watch them struggle. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, patting the piano like it was a pet. His friends snickered. Irina did not answer. She just stood there, gripping her mop, waiting. "It's a piano," he said slowly, like he was explaining something to a child. "A Steinway grand piano. Worth more than you'll make in your entire life." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Have you ever even seen one up close?" One of his friends, a girl with blonde hair and heavy makeup, laughed nervously. "Come on, leave her alone," she said, but she did not sound like she meant it. The young man ignored her. He was enjoying himself now, feeding off the attention. "I bet you don't even know what music sounds like," he said to Irina. "I bet where you come from, people just bang on pots and pans and call it a song." The group laughed. Not all of them, but enough. The sound bounced off the walls of the empty hall, sharp and mean. Irina felt something twist in her stomach. It was an old feeling, familiar and bitter. She had felt it many times before. when customers at restaurants spoke to her rudely, when landlords looked at her accent and doubled the rent, when people on the street saw her uniform and assumed she was stupid, uneducated, worthless. She was used to it by now. She had learned to swallow it down and keep moving. But tonight, something was different. Maybe it was the concert she had watched earlier. Maybe it was the Liszt piece still echoing in her memory. Maybe it was 20 years of silence finally pressing against her chest, demanding to be heard. She did not walk away. The young man noticed. His grin widened. "Oh, you want to stay and watch?" he said. "Fine. Let me show you what real talent looks like." He turned to the piano and began to play. It was a show-off piece, fast and flashy, designed to impress people who did not know any better. His technique was decent, but shallow. He hit all the notes, but missed the soul. Irina could hear it instantly, the emptiness beneath the surface. He was playing to be seen, not to be felt. When he finished, his friends clapped and cheered. He stood up and took a mock bow, then turned back to Irina with that same cruel smile. "What do you think?" he asked. "Pretty amazing, right? I bet you've never heard anything like that in your little village." Irina said nothing. Her hands were trembling slightly on the mop handle. She told herself to walk away, to finish her work and go home and forget this ever happened. These people did not matter. Their opinions did not matter. She was nobody, and that was fine. That was safe. But then the young man did something that changed everything. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a 50-euro note. He held it up, waving it in the air like a flag. "Tell you what," he said, his voice dripping with amusement. "I'll give you 50 euros if you can play a single scale on this piano. Just one scale. Up and down the keys." He slapped the money on top of the piano. "Easy money, right? Come on. Show us what you've got." His friends were already pulling out their phones. Irina could see the screens lighting up, cameras pointed at her, ready to capture her humiliation. They were expecting her to stumble onto the stage, press a few wrong keys, and give them a video they could laugh at later. Something to share with their friends. Look at this stupid cleaning lady who thought she could play piano. Irina stood frozen. Her mind was racing. Every instinct told her to refuse, to shake her head and walk away and let them have their joke. She had spent 20 years hiding from who she used to be. 20 years pretending that part of her life had never existed. It was easier that way, safer, but something else was rising inside her now. Something that had been buried so deep she had almost forgotten it was there. She looked at the piano, the beautiful gleaming Steinway that she had walked past 1,000 times without ever letting herself get too close. She looked at the young man with his arrogant smile and his 50 euros and his phone-wielding friends. She looked at her own hands, rough and cracked from years of scrubbing floors. And for the first time in 20 years, Irina made a choice. She set down her mop. She walked toward the stage. The students fell silent, surprised. They had expected her to refuse. They had not expected this quiet, tired woman to actually accept their challenge. Irina climbed the steps to the stage, her worn shoes soft against the polished wood. She could feel their eyes on her, their phones tracking her every move. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She reached the piano and stood there for a moment, looking down at the keys. They were perfect, white and black, smooth and cool, waiting. The young man leaned back, arms crossed, smirking. "Any time now," he said. Irina sat down on the bench. She placed her fingers on the keys. And then, after 20 years of silence, she began to play. The first note rang out through the empty concert hall like a bell dot. It was just one note, a single key pressed down by a single finger. But something about it made the air in the room change. The students who had been smirking and whispering went quiet. The phones that had been recording stayed up, but the hands holding them went still. Irina did not look at them. She was looking at the keys, at her own fingers resting on the smooth ivory surface. Her hands were shaking. She could feel her heart slamming against her ribs, could hear the blood rushing in her ears. For a moment, she thought she might stand up and walk away. This was a mistake. She had not played in 20 years. She had probably forgotten everything. She was about to embarrass herself in front of these cruel young strangers, and they would laugh. And she would have to live with that memory for the rest of her life. But then something strange happened. Her fingers moved. It was like they had a mind of their own. Like they remembered something her brain had tried to forget. They found their positions on the keys, spreading out in a pattern so familiar it made her chest ache. And before she could stop herself, before she could think or doubt or run away, she began to play. The piece was Chopin. Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It was one of the most difficult and beautiful pieces ever written for piano. It was the piece she had been learning when she left the conservatory, the piece she had never finished, the piece that had haunted her dreams for 20 years. The opening notes were soft and slow, almost like a question. They floated through the concert hall, gentle and sad, filling the silence that the students had left behind. Irina's fingers moved across the keys with a tenderness that surprised even her. She had expected them to be stiff, clumsy, out of practice. But they were not. They remembered. They knew exactly where to go. The young man who had challenged her was still standing near the piano, his arms crossed, his smirk frozen on his face. But as the music continued, something in his expression began to change. The smirk faded. His arms slowly dropped to his sides. He stared at Irina like he was seeing her for the first time. The other students were the same. The girl with the blonde hair had lowered her phone, her mouth slightly open. A boy near the back of the stage had sat down on the edge, his eyes wide. No one was laughing anymore. No one was whispering. They were just listening. Irina did not notice. She was somewhere else now. The music was building, growing more complex, more intense. Her fingers flew across the keys, hitting notes she had not played in 2 decades, finding rhythms she thought she had forgotten. The Chopin ballade was like a story, full of twists and turns, moments of quiet beauty, followed by explosions of passion and power. And Irina was telling that story now, pouring into it everything she had kept locked inside for so long. She thought about her grandmother, who had first taught her to play on that old upright piano with the sticky keys. She thought about her parents, who had sacrificed so much to send her to the conservatory, who had believed in her when she was just a little girl with big dreams. She thought about the day she came home and found the piano gone, sold to pay for medicine, and how something inside her had broken that day and never fully healed. She thought about the years of work, the factories, the cleaning jobs, the long nights alone in empty buildings, invisible to everyone around her. She thought about all the times she had walked past pianos in hotel lobbies and department stores, never letting herself get too close, never letting herself remember what she had lost. And now, finally, she was playing again. Tears were streaming down her face. She did not try to stop them. She did not even notice them. She was lost in the music, lost in the memory, lost in a world she had left behind so long ago that she had almost convinced herself it had never existed. The ballade reached its climax. The notes came faster and faster, crashing over each other like waves in a storm. Irina's hands were a blur, moving with a speed and precision it seemed impossible for someone who had not practiced in 20 years. But this was not about practice. This was about something deeper. This was about a gift that had never really left her, a fire that had been buried under ashes but never truly gone out. And then, Just as suddenly as it had built, the music softened again. The storm passed. The notes became gentle, tender, like a lullaby sung to a sleeping child. Irina played the final phrases with her eyes closed, feeling each note in her chest. Letting them wash over her like water. The last note faded into silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Irina sat at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, her chest heaving. She felt empty and full at the same time, like she had just run a marathon and crossed a finish line she never thought she would reach. Slowly, she opened her eyes. The students were staring at her. The young man who had challenged her looked like he had seen a ghost. His face was pale, his mouth hanging open, his arrogant confidence completely gone. He looked young now, much younger than before, like a boy who had just realized he knew nothing about the world. The blonde girl was crying. Tears were running down her cheeks, smearing her makeup, but she did not seem to care. She was looking at Irina with something like wonder. Like she had just witnessed a miracle. One of the boys in the back started to clap. It was slow at first, hesitant, like he was not sure if it was the right thing to do. But then another student joined in, and another. And suddenly they were all clapping, all of them, their applause echoing through the empty concert hall like thunder. Irina did not know what to do. She sat there, frozen, overwhelmed. No one had clapped for her in 20 years. No one had even known she could play. And now these strangers, these young people who had mocked her just minutes ago, were standing and applauding like she was a real performer, like she belonged on this stage. The young man stepped forward. His face was red, and he could not meet her eyes. He picked up the 50-euro note from the top of the piano and held it out to her. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I had no idea." Irina looked at the money, then at him. She did not take it. "Keep it," she said. Her voice was hoarse from the tears, but steady. "Give it to someone who needs it." She stood up from the bench. Her legs felt weak, shaky, like she had just woken up from a long sleep. She walked to the edge of the stage, climbed down the steps, and picked up her mop. The students watched her in silence. No one knew what to say. The blonde girl wiped her eyes and fumbled with her phone, looking down at the screen. She had recorded the whole thing. Every note, every tear, every second of the performance that none of them would ever forget. Irina pushed her cart toward the back of the hall. She had work to finish, floors to mop, trash to empty. In a few hours, the sun would rise, and she would go home to her small apartment and sleep until the afternoon. Tomorrow night, she would come back and do it all again. But something had changed. She could feel it in her bones, in her blood, in the tips of her fingers that still tingled from the keys. She had played again. After 20 years, she had played and somewhere deep inside her, the little girl who had dreamed of concert halls and standing ovations was finally awake. She did not know it yet. But the blonde girl had already stopped recording. She was opening an app on her phone. Her finger hovered over a button, and with one tap, she uploaded the video to the internet. Within hours, everything would change. Irina woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. She groaned and rolled over in her small bed, pulling the blanket over her head. It was just past noon, which meant she had only been asleep for 5 hours. Her body ached from the night's work, and her eyes burned with exhaustion. She reached for the phone to turn it off, planning to sleep for at least 3 more hours before. She had to get ready for another shift. But when she looked at the screen, she froze. There were notifications everywhere. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Her phone was lighting up with messages and alerts, more than she had ever received in her entire life. Most of them were from apps she barely used. social media accounts she had created years ago and forgotten about. People were tagging her, mentioning her, commenting on something she did not understand. She sat up slowly, her heart beginning to pound. Something was wrong. Something had happened. With trembling fingers, she opened one of the notifications. It took her to a video. The thumbnail showed a dark stage, a grand piano, and a woman in a blue cleaning uniform sitting at the bench. It was her. Irina pressed play. She watched herself walk across the stage. She watched herself sit down at the piano. She watched herself begin to play the Chopin Ballade, her rough hands moving across the keys with a grace that seemed impossible. The video was shaky at first, filmed on a phone by someone who had not expected to capture anything important. But as the music built, the camera steadied. Whoever was filming had realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. The video was 4 minutes long. By the end, Irina was crying again, just like she had cried the night before. But this time, the tears were different. This time, she was not crying for what she had lost. She was crying because she did not understand what was happening. She scrolled down to the comments. There were thousands of them. Who is this woman? She plays better than anyone I've ever heard. I'm literally sobbing right now. Her emotion is unreal. This is the most beautiful thing I've seen all year. Someone find her. The world needs to know her story. Irina's hands were shaking so badly, she nearly dropped the phone. She went back to the video and looked at the view count. When she had first opened it, the number had been somewhere around 50,000. By the time she finished reading the comments, it had jumped to 70,000. Then 80. Then 100,000. The video was going viral. She did not know what to do. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the screen, watching the numbers climb higher and higher. Her small apartment suddenly felt even smaller, like the walls were closing in around her. This could not be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. Her phone rang. She did not recognize the number, so she let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. Different number. Then again. And again. By the fifth call, she turned the phone off completely and sat in silence, trying to breathe. What had she done? For the rest of the day, Irina stayed in her apartment. She did not turn her phone back on. She did not go outside. She just sat by the window, looking out at the gray Vienna sky, trying to make sense of what was happening. She had spent 20 years being invisible. 20 years keeping her head down, doing her work, asking for nothing. She had built a life around not being seen, around not being noticed, around not being remembered. And now, in one night, all of that had been stripped away. By evening, she finally turned her phone back on. The notifications had multiplied. The video now had over 2 million views. News websites were writing articles about her. Mystery cleaning lady stuns music students with incredible piano performance. Who is the woman behind the viral piano video? Hidden talent discovered in Vienna Concert Hall. There were messages from journalists asking for interviews. Messages from television producers wanting to tell her story. Messages from people she had never met, telling her that her video had made them cry, had inspired them, had changed their lives. And then she saw a message that made her stop breathing. It was from the director of the Vienna Grand Concert Hall, the same hall where she had mopped floors for 12 years. The same hall where she had played the piano just hours ago. The message was short and formal. It asked her to come to a meeting the following morning. It did not say why. Irina barely slept that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with possibilities. Were they going to fire her? Were they angry that she had touched the piano without permission? Maybe the students had complained. Maybe she had broken some rule she did not know about. Maybe everything was about to get worse. She arrived at the concert hall at 9 in the morning, an hour before the meeting was scheduled. She was wearing the nicest clothes she owned, a simple black dress she had bought years ago for a funeral. Her hair was brushed and pulled back neatly. Her hands would not stop shaking. The receptionist looked at her differently today. Yesterday, the woman would have barely glanced at Irina, just another cleaning staff member passing through. But today, she smiled warmly and stood up from her desk. "You must be Irina," she said. "Everyone has been talking about you. Please, have a seat. The director will be with you shortly." Irina sat in the waiting area, her heart pounding. She could hear people whispering nearby, could feel their eyes on her. She wanted to disappear into the floor dot after what felt like hours. A door opened, and a tall man in an expensive suit stepped out. He was the director of the concert hall, a man Irina had seen many times from a distance but had never spoken to. He had gray hair and kind eyes, and when he saw her, he smiled. "Irina," he said, walking toward her with his hand extended. "Thank you so much for coming. Please, come into my office." She followed him into a large room filled with photographs of famous musicians and shelves lined with awards. He gestured for her to sit in a comfortable chair across from his desk, then sat down himself. "I have to be honest with you," he said. "When I first saw the video, I did not believe it was real. I thought it must be some kind of trick, some editing magic. But then I spoke to the security guards who were here that night. They confirmed everything. They said they heard the music from down the hall and came running because they thought someone had broken in to perform." Irina did not know what to say. She just sat there, her hands folded in her lap, waiting. The director leaned forward. "Irina, do you have any idea what has happened in the last 24 hours? Your video has been seen by millions of people. News stations from all over Europe are calling us. The Berlin Philharmonic has called. The Royal Academy of Music in London has called. Everyone wants to know who you are." Irina shook her head slowly. "I am just a cleaner," she said quietly. "I mop floors. I empty trash. I am nobody." The director smiled gently. "No," he said. "You are not nobody. You are someone who has been hiding an extraordinary gift. And now the world has found you." He paused, his expression growing serious. "Irina, I did not call you here to fire you or punish you. I called you here to offer you something." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. Irina looked down at it, not understanding. 3 months from now, we are hosting a special charity concert, the director said. Some of the greatest pianists in the world will be performing, and I would like you to be one of them. On that stage, in this hall, not as a cleaner, but as an artist. Irina stared at the paper. The words blurred in front of her eyes. "I cannot," she whispered. "I have not played in 20 years. Last night was a mistake. I am not ready. I am not good enough." The director shook his head. "I have worked in music my entire life," he said. "I have heard thousands of pianists. And I am telling you, what you played last night was not a mistake. It was a miracle." He leaned back in his chair. "You do not have to decide today. Take some time. Think about it. But please, do not say no just because you are afraid." Irina left the concert hall in a daze. She walked through the streets of Vienna, past cafes and shops and tourists taking photographs, seeing none of it. Her mind was somewhere else entirely. For 20 years, she had told herself that her dreams were dead, that the girl who played piano was gone forever, that there was no point in hoping for something that could never happen. But now, for the first time in 2 decades, she was not so sure. Maybe it was not too late. Maybe the dream was still alive after all. The night of the concert arrived faster than Irina expected. 3 months had passed since the video changed her life. 3 months of interviews and newspaper articles, and people stopping her on the street to shake her hand. 3 months of practice, hours and hours every day, her fingers remembering things her mind had tried to forget. 3 months of doubt and fear and sleepless nights, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. But she had said yes. Despite everything, she had said yes. Now she was standing backstage at the Vienna Grand Concert Hall, the same building where she had mopped floors for 12 years. But tonight, she was not wearing her blue cleaning uniform. Tonight, she was wearing a long black gown that a designer had made just for her. Simple and elegant, the nicest thing she had ever worn in her life. Her hair was done. Her makeup was done. She looked like someone else entirely, someone she barely recognized in the mirror. Through the curtain, she could hear the audience. 2,000 people, filling every seat in the hall. She had been told that tickets sold out within minutes. People had flown in from other countries just to see her perform. Famous musicians were in the audience. Critics from major newspapers. Television cameras were set up to broadcast the concert live across Europe, all of them waiting for her. Irina's hands were trembling. She pressed them against her stomach, trying to steady herself. She had performed before, a long time ago, in competitions and recitals. But nothing like this. Never anything like this. This was the biggest stage she had ever stood on, and she was terrified that she did not belong here. A stagehand approached her with a gentle smile. 5 minutes, he said softly. How are you feeling? Irina tried to answer, but no words came out. She just shook her head. The stagehand nodded like he understood. It's okay to be nervous, he said. Everyone gets nervous. Even the legends. He paused. But I saw the video, like everyone else. And I have to tell you, I've worked here for 15 years. I've seen hundreds of performers on that stage. But I've never seen anyone play the way you did that night. He put a hand on her shoulder. You belong here. Trust me. He walked away, leaving Irina alone with her thoughts. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about her grandmother, who had given her the gift of music. She thought about her parents, who had sacrificed everything to help her dream. She thought about the little girl she used to be, practicing for hours on that old upright piano, believing that anything was possible. That little girl had never really disappeared. She had just been waiting for this moment. The stagehand returned. It's time, he said. Irina opened her eyes. She straightened her shoulders, and she walked toward the stage. The lights hit her as soon as she stepped through the curtain. They were bright, almost blinding, washing over her like a wave. She could not see the audience clearly, just shadows and shapes beyond the glow. But she could feel them. 2,000 people, holding their breath, watching her every step. The piano was waiting for her at the center of the stage. The same Steinway she had played 3 months ago. The same piano she had walked past 1,000 times with her mop and her bucket, never letting herself get too close. Now it was hers. She walked toward it slowly, her heels clicking against the wooden stage. The hall was completely silent. No coughing, no rustling, no whispers. Just silence, thick and heavy, filled with expectation. Irina reached the piano and stood beside it for a moment. She looked out at the audience, at all those faces she could not quite see. Somewhere out there was the director who had given her this chance. Somewhere out there were journalists who had written about her, strangers who had sent her messages of support, people whose lives had been touched by a video of a cleaning lady playing Chopin in an empty hall. And somewhere out there, she knew, was the young man who had challenged her that night. He had written her a letter a few weeks after the video went viral. It was long and sincere, full of apologies and shame. He told her that he had been arrogant and cruel, that he had judged her without knowing anything about her, that watching her play had changed something inside him. He told her he was dropping out of the music program because he realized he had been pursuing music for the wrong reasons, for fame and praise instead of love. He told her that she had taught him what it really meant to be an artist. Irina had written back. She told him that she forgave him. She told him not to give up on music, but to find the real reason he loved it. She told him that everyone makes mistakes, and that the important thing is what we do after Dot. She did not know if he was in the audience tonight, but she hoped he was. Irina sat down at the piano. She adjusted the bench slightly, the way she always did. She placed her hands on the keys and felt the familiar cool smoothness beneath her fingertips. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she was not in a concert hall. She was back in her grandmother's living room, a little girl with tangled hair and dirty knees, pressing keys for the first time, and feeling the whole world shift beneath her feet. She opened her eyes, and she began to play. The music filled the hall like light filling a dark room. It started soft, gentle, a melody that seemed to float in the air like smoke. Irina played with her eyes half closed, feeling each note in her chest, letting the music flow through her like water through a river. She was not thinking about the audience, or the cameras, or the critics. She was not thinking about anything at all. She was just playing. The piece she had chosen was the same one from that night, Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, the piece she had been learning when she left the conservatory, the piece that had haunted her for 20 years. Tonight, she would finally finish it. The music built slowly, growing more complex, more intense. Irina's fingers danced across the keys, finding notes she had practiced 1,000 times in the last 3 months, notes that now felt as natural as breathing. The audience was completely still, completely silent, completely captivated. Dot, and then something unexpected happened. Irina felt tears on her cheeks. She had not planned to cry. She had told herself she would stay composed, professional, dignified. But the tears came anyway, sliding down her face as she played, and she did not try to stop them. She was not crying from sadness. She was crying from something else, something she did not have a word for. It was the feeling of coming home after a long journey, the feeling of finding something you thought you had lost forever, the feeling of finally, after all these years, being exactly where you were supposed to be. The ballade reached its climax, the notes crashing over each other like thunder, and then slowly, gently, it began to fade. The storm passed. The music softened. Irina played the final phrases with her whole heart, pouring everything she had into each note. And then she pressed the last key and let the sound fade into silence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the audience exploded. 2,000 people rose to their feet at once, their applause roaring through the hall like a wave. People were cheering, shouting, crying. The sound was so loud that Irina could feel it vibrating in her chest. She sat at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, tears streaming down her face, completely overwhelmed. She had done it. After 20 years of silence, she had played again. Not in an empty hall in the middle of the night, but on the biggest stage in Vienna, in front of the whole world. She stood up slowly and turned to face the audience. The applause continued, wave after wave, showing no sign of stopping. Irina bowed, her hand pressed to her heart, gratitude flooding through her. Dot, she thought about all the years she had spent invisible, forgotten, alone. She thought about all the nights she had walked past this piano, too afraid to touch it. She thought about the little girl who had dreamed of this moment, and the woman who had almost given up on ever reaching it, and standing there, bathed in light, surrounded by the sound of 2,000 people celebrating her gift. Irina finally understood something. It is never too late. No matter how much time has passed. No matter how far you have fallen, no matter how impossible it seems, it is never too late to find your way back to who you are always meant to be. The applause continued. The tears continued. And Irina smiled. She was home.